Hey, welcome to our channel. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss our latest content.
There was a time when the silence in our home was a comfortable blanket. It was the quiet of two people who knew each other so well that words were often redundant. It was in the way Alara would place a mug of black coffee on my desk without asking, just as I was hitting my mid-morning slump. It was in the way I'd drape her favorite throw blanket over her shoulders when she fell asleep on the sofa, the faint scent of lavender and her shampoo a familiar comfort. We had built a life on these small, unspoken certainties, a fortress of routine and shared dream. Julian and Alara. Alara and Julian. To our friends, we were the stable ones, the benchmark. I, a meticulous accountant who found solace in the clean, predictable lines of a spreadsheet, and she, a project manager whose practicality and straightforward nature were her greatest assets. At her company, Apex Dynamics, she was a rising star, known for her dedication. At home, she was my partner, the co-author of our life's 5-year plans, a woman whose quiet laugh was the soundtrack to my happiest moments. I took an immense, quiet pride in having her by my side. Our future was mapped out. The promotion I was working toward, the down payment on a larger house, even the names of children we had yet to conceive: Leo for a boy, Sophie for a girl. We were betting on time, on constancy. We were building on bedrock, or so I thought. The first tremor was so slight I almost missed it. It had a name, Alistair Vance. He arrived from the UK office, a high-level executive sent to restructure the American branches. He was everything you'd expect from his resume: tall, impeccably dressed, with a clipped British accent that made even the most mundane corporate jargon sound important. He had a presence that commanded attention without demanding it. Alara's first mentions of him were casual, dinner table talk. Alistair noticed the efficiency reports I compiled. He said they were the most thorough he'd seen in years. "That's great, honey," I'd said, genuinely pleased. "It's about time someone at the top recognized how much you do." I had always known her worth. I had seen the late nights she poured into her work, the passion she had for bringing order to chaotic projects. His recognition of her talent felt like a validation for both of us. But then his name began to colonize our conversations. It was no longer just about work. "Alistair has the most interesting travel stories. He lived in Singapore for 3 years," she'd mention while we were watching a movie. Or, "Alistair recommended this wine. It's a Malbec from Argentina. He has incredible taste." It was the way she said his name, Alistair. It wasn't just a name, it was a pronouncement. A soft, almost reverent tone crept into her voice. I started noticing other things. A new, more expensive perfume she began wearing to work. The extra time she took with her hair in the mornings. I told myself I was being paranoid, that it was natural to want to impress a new, important boss. It was professional involvement, nothing more. But the silence in our home was changing. It was no longer a comfortable blanket. It was a thickening fog. The quiet was now filled with the things she wasn't saying. I'd see the screen of her phone light up late at night, and she would angle it away from me with a practiced subtlety that was more alarming than any overt secrecy. A small, private smile would touch her lips as she typed. "Who are you texting?" I asked once, trying to keep my voice light. "Just Cassia," she'd replied without looking up. "Work stuff." Cassia and Peyton were her work friends, a pair of single, fiercely independent women whose views on relationships I'd always found a bit cynical. I let it go. I had to. To accuse her, to even voice the ugly suspicion growing in my gut, felt like a betrayal in itself. I trusted Alara. Our foundation, our bedrock, was built on that trust. I clung to that belief, even as the cracks began to spiderweb beneath my feet. The moment the bedrock shattered came on a Tuesday. It was a day like any other. The air was cool, the sky was a flat, indifferent gray. Alara was in the shower, the sound of water drumming against the glass, a familiar part of our morning symphony. Her phone, left on the bedside table, buzzed. I glanced over, expecting a news alert or a spam email, but the name on the screen was his, Alistair Vance, and below it, a message preview that stole the air from my lungs. "Dinner confirmed. Just the two of us. It'll be good to talk calmly." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. My first instinct was to confront her, to throw the phone at the bathroom door, and demand an explanation, but a cold, paralyzing calm washed over me. I took a deep breath. There could be an explanation, a project dinner, a mentorship meeting. I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe that. Later, as she stood before the mirror adjusting a pair of silver earrings, I built a wall of casualness around my question. "Where are you off to tonight?" She met my eyes in the reflection, and for a fleeting second, I saw a flicker of something: hesitation? Guilt? It was gone as quickly as it appeared. She turned, a bright, unwavering smile on her face. "Dinner with Alistair. He wants to discuss the new Q4 project rollout. He thinks I'm the right person to lead it." She didn't hide it. She offered it up as if it were the most normal thing in the world. a testament to her professional success. The lie was so smooth, so effortless, that it hurt more than the truth ever could. She was counting on my trust, using it as a shield for her deception. I didn't mention the message. I didn't mention the damning phrase, just the two of us. I simply nodded, a hollow feeling echoing in my chest. That sounds like a great opportunity. Have a good time. The hours she was gone were the longest of my life. I paced the living room, the familiar space suddenly feeling alien and hostile. Every tick of the clock was a mockery. I imagined them across a candlelit table, his charming accent filling the space between them. I pictured her laugh, the one that used to be reserved for me. I tortured myself with possibilities, each one more painful than the last. She came home just after 11. The scent of wine and her new perfume clung to her coat. How was it? I asked, my voice a stranger's in my own ears. Good, she said, avoiding my eyes as she hung up her coat. Long, but productive. I think the project is going to be a huge success. I waited. I gave her the space, the silence, for a confession, for a hint of remorse, for anything real. But all I got was practiced evasion. Her gaze skittered away from mine, and her voice was a full octave lower than usual. That night, she turned her back to me in bed, a rigid line of denial between us. In the days that followed, the chasm between us widened into a canyon. The small intimacies that had once defined us vanished. The morning coffee, the shared glances, the casual touches all gone. They were replaced by a strained politeness, a silence that screamed with unspoken accusations. She was distracted, always smiling at her phone, always late from work. Our plans for Leo and Sophie were shelved, buried under layers of silence and deceit. Finally, I couldn't bear it anymore. One Friday night, after a dinner where we barely exchanged a dozen words, I broke. Ilara, we need to talk. She looked up from her phone, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes. I'm tired, Julian. I don't care, I said, my voice shaking with a week's worth of suppressed anguish. I'm noticing everything. The late nights, the secrets, the way you look at your phone but not at me. I miss my wife. I miss the woman I built this life with. I took a breath, the next words tasting like poison. What is going on between you and Alistair? She didn't deny it. Not completely. She tried to minimize it, to shrink it into something harmless. Nothing has actually happened, Julian. It's just admiration. He makes me feel seen. I needed some attention, that's all. Attention. The word hung in the air between us, an insult of spectacular proportions. All the years of my devotion, my support, my pride in her, all of it erased and dismissed as insufficient. I stared at her for a long, silent moment. The woman I loved was gone, replaced by this stranger who could justify her betrayal with such flimsy excuses. I didn't shout, I didn't argue, I simply stood up and walked to the guest bedroom. That night, for the first time in 8 years of marriage, I closed a door between us, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that some doors, once closed, can never be reopened. In the fragile aftermath of my confrontation, an unsettling truce settled over our house. Ilara, perhaps shocked by the sight of the guest room door closing, made an attempt at reconciliation. There were tears, apologies, and promises. She admitted she had gone too far, that it was an emotional entanglement she would end, that she still loved me. A part of me, the part that still remembered the girl I'd fallen in love with, wanted to believe her. We tried. We went to the movies. We had lunch at our old favorite spot. We talked, but the conversations were stilted, navigating a minefield of unspoken topics. For a brief, hopeful moment, I thought we might be able to piece our life back together, but the fracture was too deep. I saw it in the way her eyes still lit up for a fraction of a second when her phone buzzed with a message she tried to hide. I saw it in the ghost of a smile that played on her lips when she thought I wasn't looking. The sparkle she had when talking about Alistair, even in a professional context, was still there. A reminder that the danger hadn't passed. It had just gone underground. What I didn't know then was that her resolve was being systematically eroded by outside forces. Her confidantes, Cassia and Peyton, were a constant presence, whispering their toxic philosophies into her ear during lunch breaks and coffee run. I could imagine their conversations, their sharp, cynical laughter. You're still young, Ilara. You deserve to be desired. A mistake doesn't define a marriage. Everyone has secrets. If it's just a physical thing, who's going to know? What Julian doesn't know won't hurt him. They were chipping away at her guilt, reframing her betrayal as an act of self-empowerment. They were giving her permission to do what she already wanted to do. And Ilara, fragile and torn between the life she had built and the thrill she wanted to feel again, was listening. While I was at home trying to spackle over the cracks in our foundation, she was being coached on how to take a sledgehammer to it. The final piece of the puzzle, the piece that moved my suspicion from agonizing uncertainty to cold, hard fact, came one afternoon when she was out for a long run. I had never invaded her privacy before. The very idea felt like a violation of everything I stood for. But I was no longer the man I had been a month ago. That man was a trusting fool. This new man, this hollowed-out version of myself, needed the truth, no matter how ugly. I sat down at her laptop. Her password was, ironically, our anniversary. The hypocrisy was a bitter pill. I started with her emails. Nothing. Then her chat applications. Cleaned out. She was covering her tracks. But she wasn't as smart as she thought. I found the archived folder. A digital graveyard of hidden conversations. My hands trembled as I clicked it open. There it was. An entire history of her affair. Not just emotional, but planned. Compliments that bordered on obscene. Shared fantasies. And then, the plan. The idea had come from Peyton. The annual Apex Dynamics Gala. A lavish event where employees could bring their spouses. It was the perfect cover. It's the perfect opportunity for you and Alistair, Peyton had written. Everyone will be distracted. Tell Julian you need to help Cassia, that she's feeling unwell. A classic, Cassia had added. He'll never suspect a thing. Ilara's initial responses were hesitant, laced with digital laughter as if it were all a joke. But as the days went on, her tone shifted. She started discussing logistics. The line between imagination and action was blurring, then disappearing altogether. And then I found the message from him, the one that made my blood run cold. Alistair, it will be the best night of the year. Alistair, I've already booked the room at the Grand Excelsior. Room 1208, just in case. I stared at the screen, the words burning into my retinas. Room 1208. It wasn't just a suspicion anymore. It was a fact, complete with a location and a room number. I felt the floor give way beneath me, as if I were being pushed off a cliff in slow motion. The fall was endless, the silence deafening. I wasn't just losing my wife. I was watching her orchestrate the demolition of our entire life, with her friends cheering her on. In that moment, something inside me broke. The pain, the grief, the desperate hope for reconciliation, it all evaporated, replaced by something else. Something cold, hard, and sharp as a shard of ice. She had made her choice. Now, it was time for me to make mine. For a long time, I just sat there in the quiet house, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating the dead look in my eyes. The initial shock had subsided, leaving behind a vast, frozen wasteland where my emotions used to be. The urge to smash the laptop, to call Ilara and scream until my voice was raw, was immense. But what would that accomplish? It would give her the satisfaction of a dramatic scene, a chance to play the victim, to cry and say I'd driven her to it. It would be messy, emotional, and ultimately, unsatisfying. A simple explosion was too good for them. They had planned this betrayal with meticulous, cruel detail. My response had to be the same. It couldn't be about rage. It had to be about clarity, about consequences. I wasn't going to be a victim in this story. I was going to be the architect of its ending. With a strange, newfound calm, I began to work. I carefully copied the chat logs, the emails, every shred of evidence. I saved them to an external hard drive, a small, black rectangle that now held the full weight of her treachery. Then I picked up my phone. My first call was to my uncle, Arthur, a retired police detective. Arthur had spent 30 years navigating the darkest corners of human nature. He was direct, pragmatic, and saw the world in shades of evidence and motive. I explained everything, my voice steady and devoid of emotion, laying out the facts as if I were describing a case file. He listened without interruption. When I finished, there was a long pause. So, what's the play, Julian? He asked, his voice gravelly. Do you want to burn it all down, or do you want to salvage something? There's nothing left to salvage, I said, the words tasting like ash. I want clarity. I want the truth exposed in a way that no one can deny or misinterpret. All right, he said, a note of grim approval in his voice. If you want to do this right, we'll do it right. No half measures. My next calls were to Reese and Gideon. We had been friends since childhood, a bond forged in scraped knees and neighborhood adventures. After high school, they had both joined the army, serving 2 tours together. They had seen real conflict, and it had instilled in them a quiet, unshakable loyalty and an intolerance for bullshit. They were the kind of men you called when the foundations of your world collapsed. They were in my living room within the hour. I laid it all out for them, the messages, the hotel reservation, the plan for the gala. They didn't offer empty platitudes or condolences. They just listened, their faces hardening as the story unfolded. What do you need from us? Reese asked, his voice low. I don't want to fight, I said, looking them both in the eye. I don't want cheap revenge. I want to document it. I want to walk in on them and have undeniable proof. I want her to look me in the eye and understand exactly what she has destroyed. And I want him, this powerful, charming executive, to see who he was really messing with. The plan was drawn up right there, on my coffee table. It was methodical, tactical, almost military in its precision. The Apex Dynamics Gala was the perfect stage. Everything indicated that Alara would use that night to consummate the affair she had been nurturing for months. Our plan was simple, yet devastating. We would follow her. We would have a camera ready. Arthur would handle the logistics at the hotel, ensuring we had access. Reese and Gideon would be my backup, ensuring the situation remained controlled, preventing Alistair from either escaping or becoming violent. The goal was not to cause physical harm, but to capture the truth in its most raw and humiliating form. In the days leading up to the gala, I became an actor in my own life. I played the part of the reconciled husband, the man willing to try again. I helped Alara pick out a dress, a stunning emerald green gown that made her look like a stranger. I told her she looked beautiful, and the lie felt like swallowing glass. She, in turn, was a whirlwind of excitement, chattering about the menu, the CEO's speech, the importance of the event. But she was careful to avoid the logistical details with me. When I asked about her plans for the evening, she was vague. "Oh, it's not all settled yet. A lot of moving parts." But I knew. I had seen the chat logs. I knew about the faked illness, the escape route, the estimated time of her return. She was preparing for a night of illicit adventure. I was preparing to end a story. There was nothing left to save. There were only truths to be exposed, and an entire life to rebuild from the ashes. The grand ballroom of the Excelsior was a sea of forced smiles and expensive perfume. The annual Apex Dynamics Gala was the company's showcase event, a carefully curated fantasy of corporate family and shared success. Low lighting glinted off crystal glasses, and a string quartet played softly in the corner, a soundtrack for polite lies. I had been to these events with Alara before, playing the part of the supportive spouse. Tonight, I was playing a different role entirely. Alara was radiant in her emerald dress, a perfect portrait of elegance and success. She moved through the crowd with practiced ease, laughing, networking, squeezing my hand from time to time in a public display of affection that felt like a hot brand on my skin. I smiled back, my face a carefully constructed mask of placid contentment. Inside, every nerve was firing. I was a spectator at my own execution, only I was also the one holding the axe. I watched her, my senses on high alert. I saw the way her eyes kept darting towards the head table where Alistair Vance sat, holding court like a visiting king. I saw the quick, almost imperceptible nod he gave her. I saw her check her phone, her thumb hovering over the screen. It was all happening, exactly as the script had foretold. An hour into the dinner, the first act of their play began. Peyton approached our table, her hand pressed dramatically to her forehead. "Alara, I'm not feeling well," she whispered, her voice just loud enough for me to hear. "I think it was the oysters." Alara turned to me, her face a mask of concern. "Oh, Julian. Peyton is really sick. I think I need to take her to the hospital, or at least get her home." "Of course," I said, my voice perfectly even. "Do you want me to come with you?" No, you stay, and enjoy the party," she said, her relief palpable. "It should be quick, but you know how emergency rooms can be. It might take a while." She squeezed my hand one last time. "I'll text you." She stood, and with her arm around her co-conspirator, they walked out of the ballroom. The role was being executed flawlessly, and that was exactly what I was counting on. As soon as the door swung shut behind them, a switch flipped inside me. The passive husband was gone. The tactician took over. I waited exactly 2 minutes, then rose discreetly from my table. I slipped out a side exit. The cool night air a welcome shock to my system. My car was waiting. The name of the hotel, the floor, the room number 1208 were seared into my brain. I had already been there the day before with Arthur, scoping out the entrances, the camera angles, the observation points. This was the final stage. On the way, I sent a single text to Reese and Gideon. "She's on the move." Their reply was instantaneous. "Positioned. Awaiting your arrival." They were already outside the hotel, two shadows in the urban landscape. When I arrived, they slipped into my car. Arthur was in a separate vehicle across the street, a long lens camera at the ready. Everything was timed. Everything was controlled. The hotel receptionist, a young woman whose tired eyes had seen it all, had been surprisingly receptive to a generous cash offer the previous day. For a hefty sum, she had not only agreed to look the other way but had provided us with a spare keycard to room 1208. We watched from the car as Alistair's town car pulled up. A few minutes later, a taxi delivered Alara. They didn't enter together, a clumsy attempt at discretion. He went in first. She followed 5 minutes later. From our vantage point, we could see the window of their room. The curtain was open. We saw their silhouettes enter. After a few minutes, the light went out. I looked at my watch. The plan was to wait 10 minutes. 10 minutes was the exact amount of time we had decided upon, long enough to leave no doubt as to the intention of their meeting, but not long enough for anything to be fully completed. It was a detail of calculated cruelty. The 10 minutes felt like an eternity. In the silence of the car, I could hear my own breathing, steady and controlled. Reese put a hand on my shoulder. You ready for this? I just nodded. In silence, the three of us got out of the car, crossed the lobby, and took the elevator up to the 12th floor. The receptionist gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod as we passed. The hallway was hushed, carpeted, and anonymous. We walked directly to room 1208. I took the keycard from my pocket. My hand was perfectly steady. I slid it into the lock. The light flashed green. With a soft click, the door unlocked. I pushed it open. The scene that unfolded before us was exactly what I had imagined, and yet 1,000 times worse. Alara and Alistair were on the bed, naked, wrapped in an embrace. The initial shock on their faces was instantaneous, a flash of confusion, then terror, then pure, undiluted shame. Alara screamed, a raw, animal sound, scrambling for the sheet to cover herself. Alistair, the polished executive, was reduced to a panicked, fumbling mess. He tried to get up, to grab his trousers, but before he could even stand, Reese had the camera on, its red recording light a damning, unblinking eye. We entered the room like ghosts of judgment. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I just held my position by the door, my face an impassive mask, while Reese filmed. Every second of their humiliation was being documented in high definition. Alistair, finally managing to pull on his trousers, made a desperate dash for the door, but Gideon, moving with a speed and efficiency that spoke of his military training, stepped into his path, grabbing his arm. Alistair struggled for a moment, his eyes wide with panic. His voice, when it finally came, was a trembling, pathetic stammer. Please, who are you? What do you want? Take my wallet, just let me go. And then, as he realized he was trapped, that there was no escape, something inside him broke. In front of us all, the powerful, charismatic leader lost control of his own body. A dark stain spread across the front of his light-colored trousers. He began to sob, great, gulping, childish sobs, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Please, he whimpered, sliding down the wall. Please, just let me go. He was a broken man, doubled over in a puddle of his own fear and filth. Gideon released his arm in disgust as Reese kept filming, capturing the complete and utter degradation of the man who thought he controlled everything. Meanwhile, Alara, wrapped in the bedsheet, had buried her face in her hands. Her screams had turned into desperate, pleading sobs. Julian, stop this, please. It was a mistake. I don't know how it got to this point. I looked at her then, truly looked at her, and I felt nothing. No pity, no anger, no love. Just a vast, cold emptiness. Everything I needed to see was right there in front of me. There was no room left for explanations or lies. The truth was stark, ugly, and undeniable. Just then, the hotel receptionist appeared in the doorway, panting and nervous. The manager heard the scream. He's called the police. You guys better go now before this comes down on me. Arthur, who had come up after us, gave her a curt nod of thanks and signaled to us. I looked at Alara one last time. Her eyes met mine, pleading, but I didn't say a word. I simply turned off my own phone's camera, which I had also been using as a backup, and turned away. We left in silence, leaving them in the ruins of their sordid little affair. Downstairs, I thanked my friends with a silent handshake. Arthur handed me a small flash drive containing a copy of the complete recording from Reese's camera. It's all there, he said. I took a deep breath, adjusted my suit jacket, and walked back into the gala. The party was still in full swing, an island of blissful ignorance. No one seemed to have noticed my long absence. With the flash drive clutched in my hand, I navigated the crowd until I found the technician responsible for the sound and visuals. I pulled him aside. I have a surprise I'd like to show everyone, I said, my voice smooth and friendly. A tribute to one of our hardest workers. Something special to make tonight unforgettable. Well, the technician, a young man eager to please, bought it completely. Believing it was a fun, unsanctioned corporate video, he smiled. Sure thing, man. Plug it in right here. A few minutes later, the music faded, and the ballroom's massive screens, which had been displaying the Apex Dynamics logo, flickered to life. Conversations dwindled. Cutlery stopped clinking against plates. Every eye in the room turned to the screens. The first image was of a hotel room. The camera focused on the bed. A wave of confusion rippled through the hall. Then, the figures came into focus. A collective gasp went through the room as they recognized, without a shadow of a doubt, Alara and Alistair Vance, naked and laughing. The hall fell completely silent. The video then advanced, showing the moment we burst into the room. The sound was crystal clear. The embarrassment was suffocating. The sequence showed Alistair's desperate attempt to flee, his capture, and then, the scene that caused a mix of shock, disgust, and disbelief, the executive, urinating in his own trousers, collapsing into a heap of tears like a helpless child. The ballroom erupted. People were covering their mouths, some were laughing nervously, others were simply paralyzed, their faces a mask of horror. I saw the company president, seated at the central table, turned white as a sheet. He stood up, shouting for the video to be taken down. But I had already removed the flash drive. The damage was done. It was irreversible. All around me, guests were holding up their own phones, filming the screens. Within minutes, the video began to circulate. The image of Alistair Vance, the refined British executive, crying and out of control, had gone viral. His reputation, built over years across 2 continents, had just been publicly executed in under 2 minutes. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. For Alistair Vance, it was a career apocalypse. His wife, a formidable woman who had raised their 5 children largely on her own while he gallivanted across the globe, received the video anonymously. After the initial shock and denial, the humiliating evidence was undeniable. The infidelity was one thing, the public spectacle of his utter collapse was another. She filed for divorce with a vengeance. Her lawyers, armed with the most conclusive evidence of moral turpitude they had ever seen, demanded a multi-million-dollar settlement. They got it. The judge, having seen the video in a closed session, did not hesitate. Apex Dynamics fired him without a public statement. An internal memo simply stated he was no longer with the company. He lost his bonuses, his stock options, his severance. The man who gave interviews about corporate ethics became a humiliating meme in private business forums. His name was a punchline. He disappeared from public life, his reputation destroyed beyond repair. Alara's fate was just as swift. 2 days after the gala, she was called into a meeting with HR. It was short and brutal. She was dismissed for inappropriate conduct, breach of institutional trust, and irreparable damage to the company's image. She left the office with a cardboard box in her hands, the ghost of a career she had worked so hard to build, now nothing but a source of shame. No reputable company in her sector would touch her after this. Her name was synonymous with scandal. Her friends, Cassia and Peyton, panicked. They were called in for internal reviews and managed to keep their jobs, but they became pariahs. Invitations to meetings were mysteriously withdrawn. Colleagues avoided them in the hallways. They carried the stigma of having aided and abetted the company's greatest scandal. They quickly distanced themselves from Alara, deleting old photos from social media, severing the very alliance they had helped to forge. And me? In the midst of all this chaos, I remained firm. The day after the scandal broke, I filed for divorce. I presented my lawyer with all the evidence, the chat logs, the video, the testimonies of my friends. The hearing was a formality. The judge reviewed everything and made an immediate, favorable decision. I kept the house, the car, our shared assets. I did not have to pay alimony. Alara lost everything she had built alongside me. More than the material possessions, she lost any ground she had to stand on. She was alone, without allies, her name tarnished, her life crumbling around her. The video still circulates to this day in closed forums, an unofficial case study in corporate ethics lectures on what not to do. The desperate look on Alara's face, Alistair's pathetic collapse, it's all etched into the collective memory of those who watched. For me, that recording has ceased to be a symbol of pain. It is a symbol of an ending, a brutal, necessary cauterization of a gangrenous wound. It represents the moment I took back control, the moment I ended a cycle of lies and chose a future of quiet, honest dignity. I sold the house, the one where we had planned a life with Leo and Sophie. I moved to a new apartment in a different part of the city, a place with no memories, no ghosts. I still work as an accountant, finding peace in the predictable order of numbers. Sometimes I think about Alara, and I wonder where she is, what she's doing. But the thought is fleeting, like a distant echo. I have moved on without needing to look back. She, on the other hand, is surrounded only by the consequences of her own decisions, with no one to share the burden, no one to hold her when the ground she so carelessly destroyed finally disappeared from beneath her feet. The silence in my new home is different. It's not the comfortable silence of a shared life, nor the tense silence of a broken one. It is the clean, quiet, and peaceful silence of a life that is entirely my own, and it is enough.